Wolford, a special council meeting at 2 p.m. on Friday, July the 10th, 2020. And just for members and the public know, this meeting is being held in person in the council chambers with social distancing in place. Council members are wearing and staff are wearing a mask. In the room is all of council and our CAO, Deputy Clerk, Clerk of Record for the meeting. So due to the provincial emergency order still in effect, we are unable to safely accommodate the public at this meeting. In order to ensure transparency, an audio recording of this meeting will be posted on the website immediately following the adjournment. And the recording device is as centrally located as possible. Hopefully it will pick up everybody's voice, bearing in mind that we somewhat muffled. We'll all try to speak loudly, not just for the recording, but for ourselves as well. So with that, I'm calling the meeting to order. And I'd ask members if anyone has a pecuniary interest, and if so, what is the general nature thereof. And boy, how easy to get a new habit. I almost was going to go around and say, you know, Mr. Cameron, Mr. Foster, as we have been doing in previous meetings, but we're all here, and so put your hand up if you do have a pecuniary interest. None going up, so we do not have any. Thank you very much, members. And we do have a motion for today's agenda. And if I can have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Mr. Malloy and Mr. Foster. Be it hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Marfa-Wolford does hereby approve the agenda of the special council meeting of July 10th, 2020 as circulated. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. So the next motion, and we'll have some discussion on it, get the background from our CAO, but it's regarding the a bylaw authorizing execution of professional services agreements. And if I got a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster, and thank you, Mr. Malloy. Be it hereby resolved that bylaw 40-2020, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of professional services agreements as they relate to planning matters, to be read a first and second time, and that bylaw 40-2020 be read a third and final time and passed. And at this point, I'll turn this over to our CAO. And I do believe the background on this is similar to what we've done with a number of agreements, single one-off agreements, and this is going to be making it a broader bylaw. So I'll let you take it from there and discuss it with council. Mr. Malloy.
Are we allowed to add to the agenda?
We just
no, but you didn't ask if there was any additions.
I asked if we were going to accept it as circulated, and everybody said yes. You
usually said, is there any additions to the agenda? So your trigger words for me is, are there any additions to the agenda? My apologies. So
that's
fine. May we?
What were you going to suggest?
I would like to have a brief discussion about Wilson Basil on the corner up there.
So, Worship, I think we can address that later on in the meeting.
Oh, fair enough. I don't want to do it right now. But.
Thank you, Worship.
Sure. Okay.
Sorry, you got that? Catch
that?
Yeah. Tim?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Sorry, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, Worship. So, just to give you a very brief background on item number 4, bylaw 40-2020. Many municipalities for years and years have had delegation of authority bylaws for routine things. Instead of having them come back and populate the council agenda and take council's time on them, stuff that is very routine, councils often delegate the authority to them. And there's some examples in the document that you have there. But as you know, council has directed staff to recover our costs for reviewing plans of subdivision applications, site plan application, requests for consent approval, that type of thing from proponents, so that the municipality doesn't incur those costs. What's happening is we're finding with the time limits of the Planning Act having to respond within a finite time, staff are struggling to get through the council approval process, get the lawyer to draft the agreement, bring it back to council, have council direct the mayor and I to execute the agreement, then send it to the proponent, get them to sign it, send us back with a certified check, and only then can we get rolling and then direct our planner to start reviewing the agreements. So our recommendation to council is that with the advice of the solicitor in drafting the agreement, we have a sort of a standard agreement that we're using now. And what this does is it allows the mayor and CAO to execute those agreements without the delay of coming back to council. So essentially, we're asking the proponents to give us an upfront deposit with a certified check and to commit that the municipality can draw down as we incur costs for it, and all that's doing. It's not approving, just to be clear, it does not approve the application. It makes no commitment to the proponent about whether their application will be approved. None of that. All it does is it binds the applicant by making an upfront deposit and allows the municipality to draw down against it for our costs in whether we have to use our urban planner or a lawyer, an engineer, whatever it happens to be.
Any questions for any members?
No.
If there aren't any questions, thank you for that, Mr. Roberts. So I'll call the vote. All in favor? And opposed? You're opposed, Mr. Cameron?
Yes, I am,
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Well, given the fact that we've been trying to get back to regular meetings and we've sort of been not heard, I think giving too much power to the mayor, especially since we're going to be coming up with a lot more interest in the village with these bills that are going on. I think keeping the format in council and in I'm explaining to you.
No, if you're not.
Sorry, gentlemen, finish your comments, Mr. Cameron, and then
Bob,
Mr.
I have an opinion, and I'm allowed to express it. Period. That's why I don't want to, because there's too many things coming here, and we're giving too much power to the mayor to make these decisions. And I have a feeling that it's going to go off the rails a bit, and I not really feel comfortable with it, given the fact that Councillor Malloy and myself have been asking to go back to regular meetings since the province had changed its mandate 3.5 months ago. With the difficulty we've been having even coming back to do regular business, I think giving extra powers here and there, I don't feel comfortable with it because I don't really trust it. And that's my opinion, and that's how I feel, and I'm voting no. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to make a clarification, be absolutely crystal clear. This is not giving any extra power to the mayor. As a matter of fact, the mayor doesn't have any power per se, to use that word. And even during the pandemic, COVID-19, the provincial declaration of emergency, the mayor does not have any extra different power. I'm going to go specifically to this bylaw. And as the CAO indicated, this has absolutely nothing to do with every and single step of the planning process. All it is doing is affording the opportunity, if a developer of some way, shape, or form is going to be doing something, we secure a deposit. Period, full stop. Has nothing to do with the powers of executing anything to do with the Planning Act or Building Code. Zero, nothing. You need to be crystal clear on that. That's the, yes, Mr. Cameron?
Power may have been a misuse of words, but I just think that during the process that we've been going through with Parkview Homes, I feel that council's been left out of the majority of what's been going on.
I would correct you right there. Council has been left out of nothing in terms of advancing that process. Council has been involved in every single step of the process in terms of making decisions of what we want from that to see in that development process. That's
Well,
number one.
May I clarify my statement then?
Sure.
Because there's been requests by Councillor Malloy, Councillor Foster, and myself to look at the traffic studies. We've asked to look at environmental studies, and we've yet to receive them. Every time we've had a meeting, I've mentioned it. Mr. Malloy has mentioned it. I just feel that as council, us 4 council members, when we have a concern, those concerns aren't being addressed. And I feel that the process is proceeding without our involvement in it. I'm not saying anything's wrong, I'm just saying if Councillor Foster wishes to see a document, he should be allowed to see that document, as well as any other member on council. The request has gone in by Mr. Malloy 3 or 4 times, myself 3 or 4 times. Councillor Foster had mentioned it at the open meeting that he'd like to see those documents, because he's asked a few times in in-camera meetings about, you know, are we sure we got these documents, have we received these documents? These documents would be beneficial for us as a tool as we make decisions for Parkview. And I feel that we're always sort of getting cut out of it. That's my feeling. Whether that's what's happening or not, I'm not saying that, I just feel that way. And I think the process, as this process unfolds and all these other interests, so-called interests and future interests within the village and the municipality to build, I think that keeping council's fingers in those decisions, no matter how irrelevant or relevant they are, I think that keeps that process in a more clear view, publicly and for council. And that's the way I feel. And if I'm being too precautious, I apologize for that. But I think that as we move forward in the next few years, that we should be having a larger input by council, and council should be allowed to view and review documents. The documents may say nothing or say something, but we should at least be allowed to see those documents. That's all I'm asking. And I don't feel, every time we come to a meeting, we're handing over this process to the mayor, this process to the mayor, this process to the CAO and mayor, this process to the CAO and mayor. It's basically, I feel it's basically cutting us out. In the end, we get to make a decision, but as that process unfolds, if we're not being kept relevant to as it's developing, how can we make an informed decision? That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. I know I'm not sure if Mr. Foster wanted to make a comment and then Mr. Malloy, but I'll make a comment first. And I take great exception and concern when you admit that you may not be familiar with the process, and yet you make an accusation that the mayor is getting more power. And as a public official, perhaps it may be beneficial if you had a tutorial on how not just how governance works, but also how specifically, in this case, the planning process works. And I'm going to repeat, this document today has absolutely nothing to do with the decision making in a planning, any aspect of the planning approval process. I don't recall specifically a member of council saying that they wanted to see a copy of the traffic study or see a copy of the environmental assessment. If they had and they haven't received it, it's easy to get a copy. It's not a matter of withholding for sure. Typically, the traffic study would go at the county level of the plan of subdivision process. Notwithstanding that, anyone can get a copy of that. You also alluded to earlier, and I take great exception, during the pandemic when we unanimously agreed, and here we are now in the month of July, going to our regularly scheduled, by bylaw, meetings over the course of the year. We'll be back in the regular cycle July 27th. But we also said that we would have meetings as needed, and we'll call them special meetings, which we've had numerous ones. So what's been happening? We're very fortunate. We passed a very good budget, which allows staff to do all the things that are needed over the course of the year. So from an operational point of view and services to every resident and business in our municipality, well, perhaps a little differently because of times, everything is being done. When anything is needed to be done, staff, in terms of either direction and or approval from council, we've had a special meeting for those things to take place. Unusual times during the pandemic, but we've been doing that very well, open and transparent. So having said that, I'll go to Mr. Foster, then Mr. Malloy, and then we will get back to the bylaw discussion. Mr. Foster.
My only comment, Mike, was when you stated we've been trying for 3.5 months to get back to regular meetings, that would require rescinding a bylaw. You understand that, right? So you didn't put a motion of bylaw forward or a motion, what I'm trying to say is there is a process that we all agreed to.
Mhm.
So we've not been, so if you've been trying to get back to regular meetings for 3.5 months, I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, Councillor Malloy had requested it. I had supported his request at the table. We needed a third councillor to support that request so that we can move that forward, which we never got. And I understand exactly what the mayor is saying. He's absolutely right. We did vote that bylaw in it, and I did vote yes to put the Emergency Management Act management into place. But that was because of the information given to us by the province. But the province, 2.5 weeks later, changed its mandate and its direction on that and allowed council to go back to regular meetings and allowed committees to go back to their regular meetings. That's what the province had done 2.5 weeks after they put the emergency in, because it wasn't going to be a 3 or 4 week shutdown.
You're saying in April, you could have gone back to regular committee and
Yes.
council meetings in April?
We could have, yes. The province changed its mandate.
Are you sure?
We had mentioned that at a couple of meetings to support that. It's all on tape. I mean, the meetings are all taped, but it's all there. And you know, those requests, we needed a third councillor to move that forward. We need 3 councillors to approve that to get a motion to get going on that. And Councillor Malloy had mentioned it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at least 3 times. I had mentioned it a couple of times. And the reason why we mentioned it is because the rest of councils in our surrounding areas had gone back to regular council meetings with provisions in for COVID. They had their distancing and so on and so forth. We should have been doing the same thing. That's all I'm saying.
Thank
I
you,
agree
Mr.
with the mayor. We did voted it. No problem. I have no problem. I voted for that. But the province said they were shutting everything down, everybody down. It was done. So in that case, we need the emergency management team. But after that, they had changed that mandate because they were getting numbers in that this was going to be 6 months, a year to 2 years. So they decided to allow the business of municipalities to continue. They changed that. And that's when Councillor Malloy and myself had asked to go back to regular meetings. That's just a clarification on,
In April, you're saying in April.
I believe it was in there.
Mr. Malloy.
Yeah, April, June, yeah.
April, June, there's a huge difference in there, Tim, that's 3 months.
Oh, sorry, April, May, sorry.
Okay.
I'm months back. Okay.
We're retired, Bob. Time flies, Bob.
Hi. Just 2 things. First of all, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Cameron says. But I don't think that's what we're talking about right
Correct.
now. So maybe we could get a clarification. How does it work now without this bylaw in place? How does the disbursement of the money the developer puts forward get spent? Is it just a piecemeal as it happens, or what goes on with it?
We did 2, right?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So we've only done a couple so far. We did, using the opening agenda, so we did Parkview Homes. We required them to place a deposit of $20,000 down, and we've been drawing down on that. Had we not done that professional services agreement, so there's two things to answer here. One is, if we don't do a professional services agreement, the municipality ends up perhaps attempting to recover those funds from the developers after the fact, but it's much, much more difficult to retrieve those funds after the fact.
Makes sense, yeah.
So it's advisable to have that agreement in place. Our lawyer has advised us to do that. So assuming that we're going to do professional services agreements, but without a delegation of authority, then each time somebody makes an application, and typically the process is they apply to the United Counties. Once they've completed the entire application package, paid their fees for applying and so on to United Counties, they will send a notice of completion to the municipality, which tells us now the clock starts ticking, essentially. And typically it's 90 days to respond.
Okay, this is my real question. Is in the past, prior to this bylaw, how was money drawn out of that those monies that the developer gave you?
The process of drawing down the money, if we had a professional services agreement, was the same. The difficulty is with the lag time, without delegated authority,
Yeah.
the lag time between receiving the notice of completion about the application and being able to get to council, get through the lawyer, get a draft agreement together, get to council, get the direction for the mayor and I to execute the agreement, and I can take you through the whole process. Tell me if you don't want to hear the whole process, but then go back to the applicant, have them get a certified check, sign the agreement, get it back to us, and then notify our planner to begin. It takes a huge chunk out of the 90 days. Typically 90 days the municipality has to respond under the Planning Act. And then it puts us up against the wall, especially on a major project like the ones that we've been dealing with lately. And it places us at risk of having an LPAT appeal. We already have, because of workload and the pandemic that we've faced, we do have some applications right now that are at risk of an LPAT appeal.
And the appeal would be because we haven't reacted quickly enough on the...
We haven't been able to respond as quickly. Part of it has been workload, part of it has been pandemic, but I'll be very frank with you, before putting this on the agenda, I was concerned that council not having been exposed to the concept before, that you might have some concerns about it. So what I just want to reassure you about is typically I shouldn't say typically, many municipalities have a delegation of authority bylaw for very common things. And if I can give you an example, we pared this down to one item because it was that one item that we're struggling with the most and the municipality is at risk with right now, and that's the professional services agreement. But some of the typical things that they use it for are, the municipalities will delegate authority to the CAO for things like extending, if we have a grant, when we execute a grant, when we receive approval of a grant from the granting agency, there's typically an agreement with it. We bring that back to council. Council approves that agreement. But sometimes what happens is they extend the duration of the grant, allow us more time. Right now, we have to bring that back to council to approve it. In other words, we already have council's approval for the grant, the nature of the project, the budgeted funds, everything else. And all this is gives us an extra lag time, an extra amount of time to approve it. We have to bring that back to council.
Okay.
That's commonly delegated to a CAO or a CAO treasurer, that kind of thing.
Mr. Molloy?
Yeah, I understand the gist of the whole thing, although I get somewhat concerned, maybe too strong a word, but let's use that right now. And it's the second line of the hereby resolve that authorize execution professional service agreement as they relate to planning matters. Now, as they relate to planning matters is a pretty broad scope of issues. I think if I understand you correctly, the gist of this is to apply to developmental, the ability to use the sources that the monies that a developer is required to deposit with us, and so that we can adequately use those funds to pay for the studies that we have to do, and this will allow us to do it without having to come back to council each and every time.
Correct.
Okay. All I'm saying then is that the agreement as they related to planning matters is too broad a sweep to cover that individual, that specified item. Does that make sense to you?
So may, Your Worship.
Yeah.
So, again, very often a delegation of authority bylaw exceeds even beyond that into financial transactions and so on.
Yeah, but you're not going to go.
And why we brought this is because specifically on planning applications.
I understand that.
And I just want to reiterate, it does not give the mayor or I or both of us together or anybody else the authority to approve a planning application or anything else. It's all it is with the legal draft of the agreement, so in consultation with the municipality's lawyer, it allows us to execute the agreement when they're making a deposit of funds for an application. So it protects the municipality.
But nowhere in this does it mention the word developer. It's a broad brushstroke. It just says planning matters. If it was somewhere in there, I won't wordsmith it right now because I can't figure it out. But a professional service as they relate to the planning matters involved with development, the process of developing lands within the village of Miracle Wolf or something like that. You know, because I mean I've sat on PAC long enough, and there's lots of things that come up to PAC that are not involve planners.
If I might, I'm not sure if this will help, and I'll go to Mr. Cameron, but the balance of that sentence says, planning matters in order for the village to recover costs and disbursements from applicants, including developers, for the purposes of reviewing applications under the Planning Act. So if there isn't any cost, you know, what we call external costs, if you will, for reviewing those applications, then it would not. In other words, if there was, let's say, a straight up severance application,
Yeah.
You know, goes to PAC, the chief building official would have a comment, comes back to the council, and we say yea or nay, there aren't any costs there. But if it had to go, say, to an external, to have an environmental assessment done, and there was a cost, this would allow the municipality to recoup those costs. So in other words, it's very tight, from my perspective, in terms of only things that, when there's a cost that when there's a review that had a cost under the Planning Act, for us to recoup that cost.
Okay,
That's the way I view it.
Yeah, sure, okay, I understand it, but that's not what it says. You know, when you get the line, disbursements, costs and disbursements from applicants, including developers,
Yep.
that doesn't mean only developers. It just says including developers, but it could be something else, something else, something else, something else. I'm in full support of being able to give the ability of the CEO and the mayor to access those funds.
No, whoa, please.
Okay, sorry, well, did I misspeak?
No, it's not us accessing those funds, it's putting in place the structures so that people deposit the money for the municipality.
But then we get to use that money to cover.
Well, yeah, but not the, please don't say the CAO and the mayor.
Sorry,
No, Mr. Malloy, it's important to me, okay, that we have those words captured.
I've already
very
said I
clearly.
misspoke, so. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so the money comes in, right, and is there, and then it's used to offset the costs of the things that we have, right? Okay, so, but that should be specific to developers. You know, it's not, it doesn't say it's specific to developers.
Mr. Robertson, then I'll go to Mr. Cameron. Or, I haven't forgotten you.
Great, thank you, Worship. So I wonder if it would appease some concerns here if it wasn't quite so broad, and it said costs and disbursements from, I'm not too sure about the definition of developers, but applicants would certainly be appropriate. And if you specify for applications regarding plans of subdivision, site plan approval, lifting part lot control, and severances, I think those are the vast majority of what we're struggling with. It would limit it to that. Again, I just want to specify, this makes no difference in terms of who has authority to draw down the funds or anything else. It's only a matter of who's executing the agreement. And I completely appreciate that.
One quick question. You remember that we once sat on council with a doctor of chemistry from Montreal.
Go on.
Okay. And what he would do, much to the chagrin of everybody around the table, would take little parts of a sentence like that and sit there and spin it and spin it and spin it and spin it forever until you were so dizzy you just say, okay, fine, whatever you want. All I'm saying is it needs to be more exact.
And then as Mr. Robertson pointed out, we could include.
Yeah, like the list he included, okay?
Yep.
So it's not this broad scope. It is, these are the funds, bing, 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 bing. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Cameron and then Mr. Foster.
Yeah, just to continue on Mr. Malloy's journey there. When
Don't encourage.
when you use words that are like too broad, it leaves it up to interpretation. So one's interpretation of a legal requirement can be different than someone else's. If it's not specific to an item, specifically this A, B, and C, if it's A, B, C, D, or E, or possibly E and F and G, that leaves it up to interpretation. This is too broad.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Did we not just pass this?
Yes, you did.
So
Why
this
is it not-
discussion should have occurred
Yeah,
before.
we had-
We didn't get an option to discuss it. And I don't think
Yeah,
that we
I
should
call
vote
it.
on it.
Yes, we did. That's why I asked Mike why he voted against
I
it.
voted no.
It's been voted on and passed.
Is it-
Can you move on then?
Yeah, so the motion is actually passed.
Well, okay,
Okay, this is a discussion after, I think, because Mr. Cameron had not voted in support of the motion. Having that kind of discussion, so it does, it sits as is it possible, well, you can't amend it right now, but at the next meeting have a, I don't know what you call it, an addendum, or expand on those, on the, that wording, anyway, as we just discussed with Mr. Malloy, and I think Mr. Robertson, you said there were 4 plans of development, there were 3 or 4 items you mentioned.
site plan agreements, etc.
Have clarification to, if you would, define that word? Is that something that we can do?
Thank you.
Or are you gonna have
So-
to repeal the bylaw, et cetera, et
I
cetera?
think that, unfortunately, I think, and my apologies, I had lost sight of the process as I got involved in the discussion.
Yep,
But I think because council has voted on it.
yep.
And
it has
I'm
passed.
looking at the deputy clerk to see if she agrees or disagrees, but I think it has passed. I think you'd probably have to go through the reconsideration process now.
However, that's a, we'll call it a housekeeping at that point. The intent is there. Can't change it, it's there. It's been passed. Correct? It's been passed.
It has-
4 to 1. So the bylaw is there. If we want to do a reconsideration, it would be clarifying that section that Mr. Malloy has brought forward. I think there's nodding around the table. Council would be fine with that. So we'll call it a housekeeping clarification, whether we do it at the next meeting for reconsideration, or if we happen to have a special meeting, before the 27th, we can do it then. But this does not preclude staff from at the moment entering into an agreement if there's somebody coming along, like somebody's coming along at Parkview, to say, well, you're going to require to have a deposit. And it'll, so we'll execute that agreement as outlined there, and the planning process continues on.
Thank you, Richard. I think that's correct.
Fairly straightforward. From the clerk's point of view, that's the process we can do. Obviously, this is in place. Okay.
Just one general comment.
So we'll be doing that.
Sure, one general comment. In the future, perhaps before we go to vote, we could have a general discussion from council members as to what they think. Often, in this case, I hadn't given any thought to that at all until Mr. Cameron brought the issues up. And I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I think we need to have, instead of going straight to vote, we need to be able to have a round table on it.
I think we all, and
Maybe we
for
forgot.
sure not a problem to do it. Typically, it's pretty straightforward. And Mr. Halpney.
Yeah, I don't know, and sit here all afternoon and diddle and daddle, but the way I look at it, this is to get things going for Parkview. And why can't we just go ahead and do it? You're talking about Parkview, not a whole bunch of stuff.
This would allow any future developers to
Well,
come in.
yeah, but
And, you're right on that. Thank you, Mr. Halpney. So now we are going to go in camera, and I have a motion to go in camera, and a mover and a seconder. Please, thank you, Mr. Foster, and again, Mr. Malloy. Be hereby resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Village of Miracle Wolford is hereby moved to an in-camera session at 2:35 p.m. under Section 239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, to address matters pertaining to 1. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and 2. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.